It is insane to me that we are pretty much at the end of Vlogmas, as today is December 23rd. So since we are approaching the last 2 days, I wanted to spend these last 2 videos talking over some of the things that I've really liked in 2024 and also some of the things that I'm really excited for in the new year. So a couple of days ago, I gave you a little bit of a reading recap of all of the books that I've read this year. And in 2025, I do really want to keep up with that. So I thought I would give you a look at my TBR or to be read list for 2025 as it currently stands. Firstly, thank you to everyone who watched the last video and left a recommendation. I really appreciate it, and they added all of them onto my Goodreads list for next year. And I added a lot of them onto my Goodreads list, or in some cases brought some of them forwards to read probably sooner rather than later. So first on my list is the final book in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Silver Flames. I have finished every other book right now, and I do own this book. It is home with me in Orlando, so as soon as I get back, I plan on reading it. Now, if you watched that last video, you would know that I had quite a few ups and downs with this series. The first book, the first 2/3 of it were quite a slog. I loved the ending. The second book was absolute fire. The third one was a little bit of a slog, and I did quite enjoy the little fourth book novella, and I'm quite looking forward to A Court of Silver Flames. Everything I've heard about it makes me really excited for it, besides one portion, which basically comes down to the Sarah J. Maas spice. I've heard that this book is absolutely full of it, and I'm not really excited for that aspect because I really enjoyed the way she would write about other relationships or just the plot and the world building, and it is definitely probably the most in-depth and expansive fantasy universe that I'm reading. So I want to hear more of that. So I'm interested to see what it's like, and also just really keen to kind of wrap up this series and be able to move on to a new fantasy series. Which, speaking of fantasy series, one of my favorite series is getting its 3rd book in January, which is Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. I love the Fourth Wing world. It is quite basic in terms of fantasy world, but I personally love that. And I also was able to watch a Fourth Wing recap by one of my favorite channels. They do little animated recaps. I cannot remember the channel for the life of me, but I will leave a link to that video down in the description below. But when it comes to Fourth Wing, I love the dragons and the universe and kind of the military / corruption aspects of this world, and I cannot wait to see how this story continues on. And it is a similar story with Sunrise on the Reaping, which is another prequel from the Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. Late last year, I finished rereading the Hunger Games, and unfortunately, I never got around to Catching Fire and Mockingjay, or even A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So all of those 3 kind of also loop in with this one, but Sunrise on the Reaping is like Onyx Storm, one I am going to pick up immediately as soon as it comes out. I love the Hunger Games universe. I love the Hunger Games stories. I think Suzanne Collins as well is a really great young adult author. I loved her when I was a teenager, and I loved rereading the Hunger Games last year as a now adult. And that was almost 10 years later as well that I did reread this, and it's been so much fun, and I cannot wait for her to delve into Haymitch's Hunger Games. His has always sounded so interesting and so emotionally conflicting, and I just cannot wait, especially after watching the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie and seeing how she delved into President Snow. I cannot wait for this book. I think it is going to be absolutely gut-wrenching, and I am so excited to delve back into this universe. Once again, following the trend of authors that I've already read, I am very excited for Emily Henry's new book, which is titled Great Beautiful Life. I just had to go and check Goodreads there. I just love Emily Henry in general. That is why this book is on this list. I read Funny Story pretty close to it releasing, and I've still yet to read The People We Meet on Vacation. So kind of both of these books are on this list so I can finish out her entire collection, I guess, of romance novels. And that's it when it comes to new releases. And probably one that I plan on reading early in the year is The Final Gambit, which is the 3rd book in the Inheritance Games series. I picked these up a couple of weeks ago, and I flew through the first one, and I read through the second one pretty quickly as well. I love a good young adult mystery. I've already bought this book as well. It is sat on my shelf waiting for me. So I definitely plan to read this one sooner rather than later, because I'm really interested to see how this universe ties up, because I feel like the second book and Avery's story left it a pretty good note, but there was still a couple of mysteries left to be solved, and I have a feeling we're going to get them, as well as a couple other mysteries in the 3rd book, and it's just going to be a fun time overall. After that though, I'm probably going to put a pin in it. I don't know if I'm interested in reading the spin-off ones necessarily. I think I would just move to a completely new mystery book, which is why Gone Girl is also on my list. Now, I have not watched the movie, and I am very glad that I haven't, and I'm going to continue to hold off that until I have read this book. The reviews on both the book and the movie are absolutely rave craving, and I am so excited to delve into this, especially while I'm really in the mood for a mystery. I don't really know anything about it, so I'm kind of going in blind. I know it's quite a dark book, and one of my English teachers actually recommended me this book when I was in year 10, so I am really excited to finally get around to picking this up. This next book I actually got a comment about in that other video, which is why it's kind of been bumped up more into my TBR list, and this is Powerless, and therefore as well kind of the Powerless series, depending on how the first book goes. I bought this book a while ago and I intended to read it this year, but I just never got around to it and got distracted by a bunch of other books. However, once I finished Akatar, I feel like this would be a pretty good in-between one before I started another bigger, longer series. So I'm really looking forward to it. There's only 3 in the series, and one of which is a novella. So I'm hoping to get into this probably before the summertime, because when summertime hits, I want to read cheesy romance. And one of those that I'm kind of saving for the summer period is This Summer I Turned Pretty. I know that this became an Amazon show, and it's not a show that I've ever been interested in watching necessarily, but I bought the book and it was quite short and quite thin, and I loved the author's, like, To All the Boys I Loved Before Netflix adaptation movies that I watched when they came out. They were fantastic, and her characters and her love interests seem to be really, really good. Not that I've read the To All the Boys I Loved Before book, but that is one that I would like to pick up one day. However, This Summer I Turned Pretty, I'm leaning towards more just because it's a story that I'm not familiar with, and I would like to get to know that. Equally in summer, I would really like to read the book The Paradise Problem. Now, I first heard of this when watching a Haley Pham book video, and the premise of it sounded very interesting. It was again kind of giving like that mystery Knives Out type of vibe, which I absolutely love the Knives Out franchise and the movies and the mystery aspect, so I was really, really interested by this. But just her description as well reminded me a lot of, what is the show called? The White Lotus. The White Lotus is what I'm thinking of. It sounds like it's giving White Lotus energy, and I'm so excited for that. Again, this seems like a very summery book, so I'm gonna save it for then. Now, this next book, similarly to The Hunger Games, is a reread for me, and that is Shiva by Maggie Stivada. Now, this was a really massive craze in my primary school when I was in year 6. Everyone was reading it. I think majority of that plot completely went over our heads as young tweens, and I think we all just liked it because it was similar to Twilight, but I didn't really like the vampire aspect of the Twilight movies when I watched them when I was younger, so the fact that there was purely werewolves is really exciting. Now, the reason this is on my TBR is because I have caught wind that they are making a movie, I think, out of it, or maybe it's a show, that stars Maddie Ziegler, who used to be on Dance Moms, and also Sophia Wiley, who I remember from High School Musical, the series. There's also a ton of other like young actors that are in this from various things that I have seen. I don't really remember much about this book other than it was written in first person. You know, it's a love story. She falls in love with a werewolf, and it's kind of set in Mercy Falls, which is like a gloomy forest type of thing. So I'm really excited to delve back into this because I have not thought or read about this book since like 2010, maybe. I feel like that's quite generous. And lastly, there are 2 different series. The first one being the Divine Rivals series. Now, this is a young adult romance series. I've had a couple of friends who have read this book and they absolutely rave about it, so I would like to try it out. Now, the other lovely thing is that now that I've moved to the USA, I have access to the beautiful covers in like the hardcover version. The Australian covers for this book absolutely suck, so I'm really glad that I'll be able to buy them and try it out. And there's only 2 books in this series, so I should go through it pretty quickly when I do decide to pick it up, and I think I will try and read that before I read the last book / series on my TBR, which is the Throne of Glass series. I think from everything I've heard about this, you know, it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be a great time. The fantasy world is a lot more intense and in-depth than any other book that I have read so far, so I want to read a couple more books, and especially fantasy books, before I really delve into that. It is a long series. I think there are 7 or 9 books in total, and a lot of them are like 800 pages. So it's going to be a really big task, but I am so excited to find out what it's about. I have no idea what I'm getting myself into, and I kind of want it to stay that way. So if you have read it, don't tell me what it's about. And I anticipate that I will probably get around to that like late autumn next year, if not winter time, which I feel like is quite a good time of year actually to read a fantasy book. And there are probably going to be a lot more books that get added to this list as the year progresses. I'm hoping to read 26 books again. I'm going to set that as my goal straight off the get-go. I feel like it's quite a good goal for me because I do want to read more and stop using TikTok and Instagram Reels and all of those doom scrolly apps and add in more reading. So if I can achieve like 2 and a bit books per month. That is a really, really big win for me and a step in the right direction, though I don't necessarily want to push my goal because I even feel like 26 this year was kind of hard for me to hit at some times, though maybe I'll impress myself and get to 28 or 30. That would be really, really cool. So I look forward in a year's time to kind of coming back to this book and seeing just how many of these I got. I'm also going to make like a little TBR spread in my bullet journal, which I really want to try and show off at some point. However, I don't really know how many more videos I'm going to be able to cram onto my second channel now that Vlogmas is over before the end of the year. So maybe that will be a January activity. But if you are a reader, please let me know what is on your TBR list down in the comments below. And I will see you tomorrow with my top list of sets and minifigures from Lego for 2025. So I hope you're all having a fantastic holiday season, and I will see you tomorrow for the final day of Vlogmas.